crave my indulgence, I'll just play you a little bit of a video that's been prepared. You may or may not know, but an awful lot of money has been spent redesigning, redeveloping the Courier Mail, Sunday Mail building, and this gives you a little bit of a taster of it.
The Sunshine State, land of drought and flooding rains, of towering buildings and towns that go boom. The most beautiful chunk of earth in the world, home to 4.5 million people with an unquenchable thirst for that wonderful thing we call news. And this is where they get it. The News Queensland Media Centre, a purpose-built $53 million media hub housing the largest group of media specialists in Queensland. 1,000 of Australia's best media specialists working across journalism, marketing, advertising, circulation and pre-press production. You hear that? That's the sound of news breaking. Change is made here. Truth is exposed here. It was on this floor in the 1980s that Phil Dickey wrote his stories on Queensland corruption that eventually led to the Fitzgerald inquiry and eventually further led to the downfall of an entire Queensland government. This is where Henry Thomas broke the Jane Patel scandal, spotlighting a defective Queensland health system that remains a quagmire to this day. And this is where, as I speak, News Queensland journalists are digging up the truth behind the flood of the century. But they're not just typing anymore. They're shooting video. They're feeding 24/7 digital sites. Love this guy. They're shooting their own stories on smartphones, finding endlessly creative ways to tell stories about crime and cricket and car crash government. If we cover the Fitzgerald inquiry today, we'd have studio interviews with Sir Joe.
I think that that's just so far down the track. But really and truly, I mean, I don't think that you want to get involved in something like that. I mean, first of all, Joe's got to have a seat.
We have a 360-degree panoramic photograph of Tony Fitzgerald's office. We have reporters in all parts of the state giving tour updates. Excuse me. This is a media powerhouse. This one building is home to 5 divisions of News Limited, with 50 publications stretching from the Cape all the way down to Byron Bay, 2 metropolitan newspapers, the National Broadsheets Queensland Bureau, websites, tabloid editions, 3 magazines, and production facilities for Sky News. From one floor, we produce a daily and a Sunday newspaper, and 24 community publications, all fueled by one extraordinary ingredient: information. This is a workplace for the future. State-of-the-art video conferencing rooms, meeting rooms, training rooms, countless facilities, all 100% Queensland. This is a new media centre for a new world of media. We've brought the past into the present, and we're taking the present into the future, telling stories with this, with this, with this, but most of all, with this. Welcome to the News Queensland Media Centre. Be part of something bigger.
And for that, for some of you who don't know, that was Trent Dalton, who now left the Courier Mail and is writing for the Weekend Australian. But just to give you a few ideas of the figures, because these are the all-important things that we live and breathe. The Courier Mail newspaper is read by roughly 500,000 people on a Monday to Friday basis and 650,000 people on a Saturday. The Sunday Mail, which covers a much larger area than the Courier Mail, because the Courier Mail is competing against things like the Cairns Post, Townsville Bulletin and the Gold Coast Bulletin on a weekday and a Saturday basis. On a Sunday, there is no alternative, there is just the Sunday Mail. That newspaper is read by 1 million people every Sunday in this state. I also looked at the figures for Quest. Quest is read by somewhere in the region of 750,000 people each week. So there's a big audience of people out there buying or picking up the printed copy of the newspaper. A number of people are going online, but by far our biggest audience is through the newspaper. Who here gets the Courier Mail or the Sunday Mail delivered to their home? I'd be curious to know. Just one? 2? 3? The rest of you? Why not? So why do you want to get your stories in my newspaper then? That's what I'm here to try and give you a little bit of an insight into. There's one common thing that we're all looking for, and it was the same with Fiona. I'll give you a little bit of a sneak preview. This is tomorrow's cover story image for the CM2, which is our weekend outdoor section. It's all about obstacle racing, what people can do. Last week, of course, it was a preview to St. Patrick's Day festivals, which now lasts a week rather than a day. The week before, I got this right, orienteering, one of my favourite sports that I remember from school, because I couldn't run very fast, but I could read a map and a compass, and the rest of the kids couldn't. So I actually did quite well in orienteering. I quite like that. And riding high, riding bicycles, riding bikes in the bush, that sort of thing. What do you notice? What's common about all those covers that I've just shown you? They're all outdoors, but there's a person. People. That's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in doing stories about interesting things and interesting people doing interesting things. And the sort of area that you'll be looking at pitching for, two potential areas. We have this What's On section here. Please do not underestimate the power of this What's On section. We regularly get emails from people when we've included things in the What's On section that they've seen an enormous number of people suddenly start paying attention to their particular event or group or society or whatever it is. So do not dismiss this. Use this and abuse this as best you can. We cannot guarantee that we'll get some coverage of what it is that you're doing, but if we know about it, we can consider it for inclusion in that. And all we need to know is, what's the event? When's it happening? Where's it happening? Is there any cost? Who's it targeted? That sort of thing. Is there a phone number? Is there a website? That's it. If you can include with that, with your information about it, a photograph of something that relates to that event, and it's the same thing that Fiona was talking about. It's always difficult. We're interested in promoting things that are coming up that people can do, usually on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but we like to try and illustrate it where possible if we can, and your picture then may get included in one of these things. That's it. It's a simple paragraph that you would pay a fortune for in advertising, but we give this away free. And we used to have 2 pages of it, but we've had to get back to 1 page at the moment, so the space is precious. Make use of it if you can. There's an email address at the top, weekends@thecouriermail.com.au. If you keep that in your database, and whenever you've got events coming up, if you just send us an email, at least then Michelle, who works on the CM2, and myself get to see that stuff. And we can either say, yep, we think it's okay to include in our What's On guide, or we might think, actually, there's something a bit more in that, something a bit more interesting, something that we think we might make into what we call a cover story. We have a nice little cover picture with people on it doing something outdoors. This could be a picture that we've taken, or it could be a picture that you've supplied if you've got some particularly good images of what it is that you do, whatever it is. So you should always be thinking about images. I was saying earlier, the picture of the person climbing, that's something that we probably wouldn't ever get a chance to take with one of our photographers. But you guys out there doing something, you're doing really exciting, interesting things. So take photographs of the sort of stuff that you're doing. So then we say, actually, that's really good. Have you got any pictures of people doing that we could actually use in part of our story? Because if we haven't got the visuals, then the story falls. You would not read a story if it was just a wall of words. You want to see pictures of people doing things. And the bosses keep telling us they want people, 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 people. And we want interesting people. We want to know what they're doing and why they're doing it. Now, you're always wanting to know how you make a pitch to us. How do you get through to us? Has anybody here successfully got something in the Courier Mail or the Sunday Mail? What did you get?
It was a bit about Brumbies.
Brumbies?
Yeah.
What was the story?
That they're trapping and removing them from the forest up near Tincan Bay.
Ah, yeah.
Tincan Bay and Rainbow Beach. There's about 1,000 of them.
That's what we call a heart story. Tug the heartstrings. Make us cry, did
I
it?
don't know whether it was in the What's On section.
But it was a story that you got in the paper? Yeah. Who else has got a story in the paper? Yep.
The QORF video contest last year. What do you know a bit about what it was?
Were you one of the photographers?
No, I was the subject of one of the photographers.
What were you doing?
Slacklining, jumping on trucking straps.
Wow, nice one. Who else has got something in there? Who else has tried to get something in there and failed? What did you try to get in?
I guess mountain bike stories.
What about it?
Well, actually, there's. I will tell you that what you were holding up before, that one standing, that's right on top. The second photo is actually of mountain biking in an illegal place.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it was a political angle.
Why was it illegal?
It's Brisbane City Council. I forget where it is. Is it Sparks Hill? The second photo. Those four women are actually doing something which is against the local law.
Should we follow that up with the front page story and out them?
If you would like to do a story, I'd be very interested in helping you do that.
You see, we're also interested in those kind of stories as well. I don't just write for this, I write heaps of stuff for other things. But I put a pitch out this afternoon. I asked some of my colleagues about, I'm talking to a group of people, I said, about how to pitch a story. What's your top tip media people? One of the things that I've been noticing is a decline in stuff that I get that's useful from Twitter. Twitter seems to be so much overburdened with endless chatter that it's actually quite hard to get anything out of it. I only got 3 replies from my Twitter question, and they weren't particularly useful. Well, the first one was from Kelly Reardon. She's one of the programme directors at 612 ABC Brisbane. She says, use the phone, don't rely on email. Don't just send us an email. Pick the phone up, call us, talk to us. If you send an email, there's a great temptation to think that it's therefore been received and understood. It might have got dumped into a junk box. It might have just got, oh God, I've got 1,000 emails this week and I'm just going to have to cull a whole heap of them. It might just get lost in the system. It might just fall down. It might still be there 3 months later unread. Pick up the phone and call and speak to somebody. Try and talk to somebody. And this is the best number. It's the main switchboard number, 1300 30 40 20. So you don't have to go remembering all these individual different numbers for who, how, what, where, when, and why. And people keep moving around and changing. I haven't been doing lifestyle features all the time I've been here. I've been doing all sorts of bits and pieces. So use the main switchboard number and call. And then ask to speak to whoever it is that you want to, who's relevant about something or other. Just pick up the phone and call. And be very direct and upfront with that person about, hi, I'm calling about this. I wondered if you might be interested in doing a story. The other feedback I got was from Andrew Lund, who works in TV, I think down in New South Wales now. No relation as Lund. He said, is it bad that the first thought that jumped into my mind was cake? Offer cake to the journalists. And Cameron Atfield from Brisbane Times said, no surveys. Now, I disagree. I actually quite like stories about surveys, if they're interesting and well-done surveys, because they can actually give you an in into a story about something or other. One of our online guys said, and I paraphrase, get them drunk, or at least promise to. Another one who's now left, and probably understandably, said, offer lots of freebies. Somebody who works at Quest said, for community publications, I like to hear the suburb name in the first 5 words. It saves a lot of time figuring out the relevance. And that's something that is quite important. Is the story relevant to us? We get lots of phone calls from people telling us something, pitching something, or they say, oh, great, sounds interesting. Where is it? Victoria, Perth, New South Wales, Sydney. Sorry, you've called the Courier Mail. Do you know we're a Queensland newspaper? That's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in stories about my backyard. I'm interested in southeast Queensland. I'm interested in wider Queensland. I'm actually interested in the whole of Queensland for possible stories. So tell me the story is relevant. Somebody else at the ABC, make sure the talent is available and not in meetings after the press release goes out. Whenever you're sending any communication to any media organisation, make sure that the people are contactable. Lisa Kingsbury, who used to present for ABC Radio in Mount Isa, 3-word headline, short, sharp and focused. It's a skill that can be learnt. I'm a case point, but if you can't pitch briefly, you probably have no idea what your story is about in the first place. And that's a very good point. Be direct. This is a story about. Don't waffle. When I used to work at ABC Radio, you try and pitch a story to a presenter and they say, you got 10 seconds. Why is this story interesting? And 10 seconds, that's 30 words. 40, 50 if I mumble a bit faster. But that's the attention span that you've got to get to these people. So be very upfront. This is what the story is about. I've got a story about such and such. We've got 18 disabled kids going to climb Mount Barney in 2 weeks' time. Would you be interested in doing a story? Great. Sounds interesting. I'm there. You already got my attention. Tell me more. Amanda Dell, again from ABC. Know the show you are pitching to. This is from a radio point of view. I did used to work in radio, so I will allow this. It's no point shopping an interview, promoting a product to the ABC, and don't call while the show is on air. So I will actually say something about the radio people. When you're pitching something to a radio station, know the radio station, know the audience that you're trying to pitch to, and be very careful about it. And don't just offer a free plug for something or other. Give them a story. Give them something that is interesting. You know, if you want to just promote your group, take an advert out. If you want to have a good story in the paper, then have a good story. Have something that's interesting. Talk about it amongst yourselves and see what other people think. Is this interesting? Are you interested in that? And if it sparks a conversation, if it gets people talking about something, then that's a good story. That's what we're after. We're after stories from life. When I did work at the ABC, we used to spend probably about an hour each morning just talking about stuff. What's happened? How hard was it to get into work this morning? What did you think about that program I tell you last night? Have you seen the price of eggs these days? And whatever it is that suddenly sparks people talking about something, after a while we go like, stop, that's radio. Let's make some radio. Let's make some calls in. Let's talk to people about it. Let's see if we can do that. If people are talking about something, then it's a story. And that applies to your group. Whatever your group is, if something's happening within your group, if some event or some person, some ability, some achievement or whatever it is that gets people talking about it, then that's something that people want to possibly read about. So it might think, oh, I'll get in touch with the paper and see if they're interested in that. They might be interested in doing a story. Somebody might have done something absolutely amazing, some incredible achievement. So let us know. Interesting people make interesting stories. Not interesting people, dull people don't make interesting stories. It's as simple as that. And you all know this because you all know what you read and what you watch on television, what captures your attention and what doesn't capture your attention. So if you see something that does capture your attention, have a look at it and see, why am I interested in that? Why might that be something that I could then use that idea of to make a pitch to a story to the newspaper? Michael Beattie, you may have seen him crop up from time to time on TV news. He's the main spokesman for the RSPCA. He says, make sure there's an animal to go with the photo. Works for me every time. He knows if he's got a good photo, if he's got a good, cute animal story, that he can get coverage. He knows he can get the TV people interested. He knows he can get the newspaper people interested. He doesn't have to worry so much about the radio because they don't really need the photo. But if he's got a real hard-look story, he's got the dog with the injuries, he's got the cat that suffered from terrible burns and bushfires, or he's got the weather-beaten dog rescued from the floods or whatever it is, he knows he's got something that's going to capture people's imagination. It's going to capture their heart. That's one thing that we're always looking for, trying to engage the heart in something. If I can make people go like, oh, that's shocking, or isn't that nice, then that makes a good story. So you might have an animal equivalent that you could get. Carrie-Anne Greenbank from the Gold Coast. Pick a really slow news day. There's not... Well, that's a good point, actually. You can actually let people know about things that come up quite in advance. And especially for weekend things. We're often looking for good weekend stories to do photos. So pitch something. Pitch something on a quiet day if there's not a lot happening. If you see that all hell's breaking loose, and there's the Fitzgerald inquiry shredding, there's the health inquiry shredding, Jayant Patel out, threat of another cyclone coming along, this, that and the other, just kind of hold off a little bit if you can, and just maybe think, I'll wait till things quieten down a bit. Because that does have an impact on us in the lifestyle section, because we find it difficult to get hold of photographic resources and other resources within our building because they're all being sucked up by doing something else. So, just think about that sometimes. If it's a really busy day, save it for some other time. Make sure the contact person picks up their phone. That's just the most annoying thing. Whenever we get sent any kind of communication, and when we try and call the person, and it's like, sorry, they're out, they're on holiday, they won't be back for 3 months, or that, well, what's the point in telling us that person and that phone number? So make sure the people that you're letting us know about are available. And make sure your talent is available on the day. We're simply looking for good stories of interesting people. And that's it. That's it in a nutshell, in one sense. It's up to you to determine what makes something interesting and how to pitch it. My other hat is I do a fair bit of science writing for the newspaper. And you wouldn't believe that outdoors and science have something in common. Well, it's all about trying to get something into a publication. And this, I knew you wouldn't go to the website and print it all off, so I've done it all for you, courtesy of the Courier Mail. Pass this around. There's a whole bunch of interesting documents about how to make a story interesting. And scientists have exactly the same problem that you guys have. They want to know what makes something, how can they get something into the news, because they're wanting some kind of recognition for what it is that they're doing. And that's exactly what you're trying to do. You're trying to get your group, your organisation, whatever it is that you do, trying to get it into the news so people can talk about it, people can hear about it, and then hopefully, what's your ultimate aim? You're probably trying to get more people interested in your activity. Would that be right? Is that your point? Or are you just looking for glory for what you do? Think very carefully about what it is that you're after and the point that you're trying to get. But I did an interesting story earlier this year with a guy from the US. He's a former scientist who now spends his time traveling the world trying to get scientists more media savvy. And he uses The Simpsons as his primary example as to how to get something interesting from a news organisation. The writers of The Simpsons have a very simple mantra with every script that they do. And I'm not a big fan of The Simpsons, I have to say, but I love this. This is brilliant. They work on the principle of the story is an and then an and then an and. But it only becomes an episode if there's a but in the story. Because that's what you're interested in. We've done this, we've been mixing this around, but what we've found is we can actually do this, or we can cure this, or we can do something better, or we've come up with a problem. And people only switch on in any conversation when you get to the but. And that's what you guys have got to think about, what it is that you're doing. And the best way to do that is to talk to each other or talk to people within your group and see if that maintains some kind of conversation. And if you can get a but, you know, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this, but you'll never guess we're going to do this in a few weeks' time, or but we're looking for, you know, some more members because we're going to collapse in a few weeks' time if we don't get any more interest in our organisation. That's the sort of stuff that actually engages people. You'll find that in any conversation. You have you know the people, the boring people. You meet them in bus queues, in pubs, in the workplace, at home, and they just talk endlessly and you switch off and that doesn't make news. It's as soon as they say, but you never guess what happened on the bus. And you say, oh, what? What happened? You've woken me up. And that's what you're looking for all the time. You're looking for the but. You're looking for the conflict, in one sense. Some people would say, when I worked at Australian Straw, they always said that you're looking for 2 conflict points. But that's what we're often looking for. We're looking for victims. I'll use that in the nicest possible way. It's okay talking to you guys about what it is that you do. I'm then looking for people who do it. And it's the same as what Fiona was saying. I want people. I want people in my What's On stories, in my lifestyle stories as much as I possibly can. So you need to find interesting people in your groups and organisations who are willing to be photographed, willing to participate in a story, willing to talk to us and be interviewed. So you kind of need to go through your group all the time and see, well, you know, who's happy to talk, who isn't happy to talk. And you need to have those lists of who is happy to talk available to us short notice. We actually work on a much tighter deadline to what Fiona was talking about. I'd love the idea of being able to plan 6 or 8 weeks ahead. Sometimes we're sitting there on a Monday, what the hell are we going to do this week? And it often is, what's on the front page? Well, it's what we could find, what we could get to within that space of time. A few phone calls went in, got answer machines. I'm not a big fan of leaving messages on answer machines because normally they come back 24 hours after I've needed them for something. So I get a bit fed up of turning people down. Sorry, I did need you last week for something, but it's gone now, the moment's lost. So I'm not a big fan of leaving messages on answer machines. I want phones to answer now. And if you've got a list of people who can participate in a story, they need to be available pretty damn soon. We work fast in news organisations. Well, certainly in the print organisation, we have very rapid turnarounds. Sometimes it can even be photo shoots that day. Now, we can do stuff for CM2, we can do stuff from the main body of the newspaper. It depends what we think is the interest or not in that particular story. So, you know, don't just think of it as, well, how can I get something in the CM2? Think of it from a general wider point of view. Is it interesting? Is it something people should know about? As in, can they participate in it? Is it accessible to them? Can they do something? Or is it just a sort of like nice, fancy that kind of story that you just want to tell us about some great thing that's happened? And take photos. Just take lots and lots of photos if you can. Interesting photos. Now, I'm conscious that Fiona talked for quite a long time. What I want to do is say, okay, I'm yours. Ask me any question you want, and I'll do my best to try and answer in any way I can. Try and help your organisation. What's your biggest frustration? Okay.
A lot of us deal with young people, and there are confidentiality, privacy type issues there. Our organisation deals with them therapeutically, so there's not just that, there's also, we've had the experience unpleasantly a couple of times of media organisations portraying somebody in a way that was particularly unhelpful, to the point where we had to provide extra counselling for them after they got interviewed on radio. Right. So there's a lot of paralysis in our organisation about actually engaging with media at all. Even though we know the benefits of it. What advice have you got for us to make that easier so that we can get a story to that you can use, knowing that time is something of an issue, but that time is something that we have a problem with because we have to go through checks and balances.
Sure. Work out what the point of the story is that you're pitching in the first place. Work out what you can do in terms of getting access to people. I use the word victim. It's just something we often, is there a victim I can use? And we're a cruel bunch behind the scenes. We have to keep our sanity somehow or other. So work out the difficulties before you make the approach. Because the problem is if you make the pitch to me or some other news organisation, and I go, great, brilliant, I want that now, and you're going, and then you're backfooting all the time, and that's when you might lead yourself into some dark area of difficulty that causes problems. And you've then annoyed the media person because they really wanted the story and they've messed them around. And so work out the difficulties beforehand and then raise any sensitivities or difficulties as you pick that pitch. We all want to get the story and get the story as best that we can. But, you know, trust us, we do have hearts. We don't want to cause any upset or grief or something like that, because that detracts away from the very point of the story in the first place. There are ways around it. Pick your journalists as well. Pick somebody who you've seen them do something that you thought, I like the way you handled that. And then pitch directly to them if you want. I've got something interesting. I've got this difficult story, blah, blah, blah. And I've done some really difficult stories about stuff, so I know the kind of stuff that you're talking about. Yeah.
And Michael, that point is very relevant for our sector when they are considering the type of story, because some will have something that's more of a feature,
yep.
and it needs to be told in that type of a way, because it needs that little bit of extra time or unpacking, so that there can be those two conflict points or whatever it might be.
Yes.
Some will be I guess what's referred to as the hard news, which may be things around livability and access to open space, you know, that type of policy end of the scale. Others will be events, lifestyle, participation, engagement with community. So it's being mindful about who to deliver that to.
Absolutely.
In those relationships. Yep.
Yep. And don't be upset if we go and talk to other people who might have opposing views. That's my job. I'm not going to necessarily take everything you say face value about something. If it's something that requires a little bit more digging into, then I will do that, because that's my job. Big science fan, went to Cairns, couldn't believe my luck that I was going to live in a state that had an eclipse, despite the fact I lived in the UK for several years and many eclipses crossed it, but they were more than 30 miles away from home, so I never went. So I was quite happily travelled from Brisbane to Cairns to see this one, thinking, yes, this is close. And so I persuaded the paper to let me write lots of stories about the eclipse. And we even tried to get those goggles as a giveaway thing in the paper, but the paper got a bit nervous about them for various health and safety reasons. Despite the fact that Queensland Trading Standards had done quite a few tests, NASA said that the cardboard goggles were okay, Queensland Trading Standards said they were okay, everybody else saying they're okay. A week out, I get a phone call from a contact of mine saying, we're really worried about the eclipse. We're really worried, especially from school kids' point of view, because they've been flogging these things like crazy up in Cairns. But the ophthalmologists say there is no safe way to directly look at an eclipse. It's dangerous to use any kind of goggles. You've got to use indirect methods. What do? We just spent months telling people that, you know, these goggles are safe, and then here comes this bunch a week out, knowing that tens of thousands of these goggles have been sold. What would you do? Would you run the story? Or would you say, sorry mate, everybody else says they're safe, no thanks? Hands up who said they'd run the story. Hands up if you said...
With a disclaimer.
What disclaimer? Well, who wouldn't run the story? Thank you. I ran the story. Eye experts say there's no safe way to look at next week's total eclipse, even using, you know, approved safety goggles. Boy, was I popular when I went up to Cairns. There were an awful lot of people who were very angry that I'd run that story, because a number of schools then polled having eclipse viewing events, because it was a beautiful time thing. It was about 6:40 in the morning or something. It was great. And a lot of the astronomers and science people and stuff were like, you shouldn't have run that story, you shouldn't have run that story. And I said, well, why? It's not me saying it's not safe. It's the Ophthalmology Society saying they're not safe. And they've always said it's not safe. So you guys have got to get your heads together and talk about it. But I'm a journalist. I think it would be wrong of me not to tell that story. So, you know, even on good news stories, we'll try and look for, you know, is there an opposing view? Are there people saying that's dangerous, that you shouldn't be doing it? So you've got to be prepared for that. We're not always on anybody's side. We're trying to play a very even, balanced line. It's hard, very hard. And we get a lot of grief for it, but hey, I think I've got the best job in the world. Any other questions?
A question around the role of media releases.
Hate them, love them, in that order.
Okay.
I don't want to do a story that includes the quotes that everybody else is going to do the story about. That's sloppy, that's lazy, I'm not interested in that. I love the media releases that just make a pitch. That, hey, you know, bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, did you know, did you know, did you know, this is happening in 3 weeks' time, or something like that. I know, and I want to talk to people, then I want to call the people up and talk to them about what it is that they've done. Now, occasionally, yes, you'll see us using quotes from media releases, but it's usually if it's something fairly innocuous. But I'm incredibly suspicious of media releases with quotes in them, especially after I discovered that the Heart Foundation, for a period of 5 years, had something like 8 different people quoted each year saying exactly the same thing. And you see, there's wonders of Google. You can just easily check these things out. So I often want to Google a quote to see, A, has anybody else used it in any other news organisation, or B, has it been said before? It's the greatest way of uncovering plagiarism is Google. It's just lovely. And I like doing that. Any other questions? I hope I've given you some insight. Take the document away and read it. It's really useful. Although it's pitched at scientists, there's a lot of stuff in there that anybody can sort of take out of that as to how to make a pitch to a news organisation. And you won't do it tomorrow or the next day, but just think about it and then say, actually, I'll give that a go and see what happens. And don't be disappointed if it doesn't work. Just keep trying.